Hi, my name is Marianna. I'm convener of IASL, and I have the pleasure today of welcoming to our 10 minutes worth series of interviews Dr. Arianna Introna. Arianna Introna received her MLitt and PhD in Scottish literature from the University of Stirling and is now associate lecturer with the Open University. Their research interests lie in Scottish literature, disability studies, the medical humanities, Marxist and critical theory, and the social history of the welfare state. And all of this can be seen in their first book, Autonomist Narratives of Disability in Scottish Writing, which was published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2022, and which I loved, by the way. Arianna has published several articles on narratives of disability in Scottish literature, and also on a variety of authors, including Violet Jacob, James Bark, Jenny Fagan, and John Burnside. They have chapters and articles forthcoming on James Bark's proletarian literature, Violet Jacob's connection to the British Empire and the Scottish Revival, and on narratives of disability in the writing of Nan Shepherd, Alice O'Gray, Hugh MacDiarmid, and Scottish literature more generally. Arianna is now close to completing a new monograph on nationed metaphors of illness and disability in Scottish culture and literature. And they're also in the planning stages of their next major research project on the relationship between disability and the state as imagined in Scottish literature and culture, which I hope we'll be hearing a little bit more today. Arianna, welcome to the 10 Minutes interview. And here's my first question. Could you go over your experience of coming to Scottish literature for us? What got you interested in Scottish literature? What in particular made you want to do a PhD and all your research on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Marie, first of all, in welcoming me to this 10-minute interview. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you for the questions that you prepared for me. Yeah, as for your first question, so this question, I fell in love with 18th century and 19th century Scottish poetry as a teenager, and became through that really fascinated by the relationship between Scottish literature and history, and in order to explore that nexus, I enrolled in the combined degree of Scottish history and Scottish literature at Stirling. And by doing research in my final year for my dissertation, I became at that point intrigued by the work of Violet Jacob and by the neglect of women's writer. And at that time in 2009, the situation was much worse than it is now. So at that point, we were reading and studying this neglect. And I followed up my undergrad degree with an MLitt in modern Scottish writing at Stirling, and that program introduced me to the intersectionality of the neglect that writers such as Jacob were experiencing again at that time, and also deepened my understanding of the imbrication between literary and political and historical context in Scottish literature. And I also realized in writing my dissertation on Jacob that it was not just authors that could be the object of critical neglect as a result of intersecting factors, but also narratives, sets of narratives. And that was the case for narratives of disability, which became the focus of my PhD, which I did immediately after, and inspired by the point I had reached with my research on Jacob.
Okay, interesting. So let's get into the core subject, your approach to Scottish literature, which is particularly innovative, as you know, your recent book shows. You tackle the topics of Scottish literature from a disability studies perspective, and I can see this in your the book that you published in 2022, but you also co-edited with Gavin Miller the latest issue of the journal Études écossaises entitled Recovering Imaginings of Illness in Scottish Literature and Culture. That was in 2024, very recently. You've also got, as far as I know, because I'm well placed to know that, a chapter on Alistair Gray's fiction from a crip enchantment perspective. So can you tell us more about those projects? Because it's not just the three projects, but more generally the field of studies that you work in what it includes, what it entails.
Yes, yes. Thanks so much for this question. Um, yeah, yeah. As part, I think all my yeah, in my research, I'm passionate about experimenting with bringing together interdisciplinary approaches, especially critical disability studies, with a recuperative ethos. And in doing so, I'm driven by the feeling that in order to recover certain narratives or authors, specific methodological lenses are needed, and that belief comes from my experience of trying to recover and make sense of narratives of disability in Scottish studies in Scottish literature, sorry. That when I was doing at the beginning of my PhD, I thought, oh my God, there is a dearth of these narratives just because I couldn't find anything written about them. But
Mhm.
now, after several years, I see that actually there is a plethora of representations of illness, madness, disability, body-minded non-normativity. So I think that in order to recover, and often authors that maybe are not interesting from other perspectives are interesting from a disability studies perspective. So my approach really comes out of that, my combination of recuperative and interdisciplinary approaches to Scottish literature comes from this experience of being interested in narratives of disability in Scottish writing. So my book, the book you mentioned, the Crip Enchantments book, builds on my PhD research
Mhm.
to stage a critical dialogue between Scottish literature and critical disability studies, as well as Marxist theory. And I do so in order to make sense and explore how disability appears in 20th and 21st century Scottish writing as a class and as a nation phenomenon. So that's the focus of the book. And yes, and I'm building on that book with the other two projects that you mentioned in the introduction. The first is the one on nation metaphors of disability, which I'm completing hopefully in the before the summer finishes. I've been working on it for a long time, and the second is more instead focuses on Scottish working class literature, and of course narratives of disability within that. And as part of that project, I focus on the relationship between disability and the welfare state, as well as the different authorities that administered social welfare, from the 19th century to the present. So I'm interested in how that relationship has been imagined in Scottish literature. And that will be the next big project that hopefully will start in the summer as soon as the Nation Metaphor book is finished and on its way into the world.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent.
Yes,
Excellent.
sorry, you mentioned so the other two projects that you mentioned. So
Yes.
yes,
Go on, go on.
okay, yes, yes, you mentioned the Etudes Écossais special issue
Yes.
that I co-edited with Gavin Miller. That was a very exciting project for us because we wanted to create a space in which to bring into dialogue both the medical humanities and disability studies with Scottish literature,
Yeah.
because we saw it as a fundamental step to theorize the variety, diversity, plethora of narratives of illness and disability in Scottish literature. But also we hope to create a space that would legitimize disability and illness as categories of analysis in our field. And we got really amazing contributions spanning the 19th century, post-war period, the 80s, and even 21st century Scottish literature, and putting forward very interesting arguments about the interdisciplinary dialogues, but also actually recovering figures and authors and texts that are quite exciting to read. So I do recommend checking out that special issue. And I have names, but maybe I don't have time to go into depth. So please do check out that special issue. And finally, I have a chapter
Yeah.
about Alistair Gray for the Edinburgh Companion to Alistair Gray, co-edited by Marie. And it's been really wonderful experience to research and write that piece because Gray is very important and exciting to explore in the context of narratives of disability and body-minded non-normativity, which maybe is more apt to describe his imaginings. And what I do in the chapter, also drawing on archive material and the contexts and his non-fiction writing, I try to explore the different non-normative words that Gray imagines, focusing on those organized around ill, creep, and mad body minds.
Yeah, thank you, Arianna. You know about this book, we were talking with my co-editors, and there's been so much published about Alistair Gray in particular, and we were saying that you put the spotlight on a completely new perspective on this author. So really, really fascinating. In the little time that we've got left, can I ask you one last little question on your job as a lecturer with the Open University? Can you tell us about your teaching as well?
Yes,
If there's
yes,
much
thanks.
Scottish later,
Yes.
tell us.
Yeah, yes, thanks for the question. I teach with the Open University, and as it has always been the case in my career, my teaching career, I haven't had the opportunities to teach Scottish literature focused modules.
Mm.
Of course, I teach text and authors, Scottish literature texts and authors here and then, but there is not a primary focus on Scottish literature, which has really shaped my research in the sense that I've really come to feel that unless there is a Scottish literature framework, um, we cannot appreciate developments and the constellation within which Scottish literature texts and narratives would fit. And for that reason, I become even more keen about certain cross-period projects that I've been doing. One is a contribution to the Wiley-Blackwell Encyclopedia of Scottish Literature. The other one is a companion to Scottish literature. And there I have, and these are really start from the Renaissance and the 18th century, respectively. So it's really cross-period, and I think I've also have an article on Scottish futurities. Again, that's cross-period, and I hope when I turn 40 in a few years to start my dream book that would be an introduction to narratives of illness and disability from the Renaissance to the present. Because I think that what I've been missing in my teaching is really the opportunity of a cross-period engagement with our field, that just teaching single texts and authors as part of an English literature course for me is not enough. So it's not really that my research is a substitute for the teaching I haven't been able to do, but
Mm.
in a way it's a way of responding to that frustration of reading of not reading Scottish literature as Scottish literature.
And maybe introducing new frameworks in the
Mm,
teaching as well.
yes, yes, that's my
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, well, that has been really fascinating. Thank you, Arianna. We've come to the end of our 10 minutes, so I just want to thank you for giving us this insight into your work and for taking the time to be with us for today. Thank you so much, Arianna, and best of luck with all the
Thanks.
projects that you've got going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marie, for this interview and your amazing questions. It's been a joy and an honor to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.